My daughter sold my husband's library to evict me. Now she spends her life restoring it. She looked at the rows of leather-bound first editions, her father's entire life's passion, and said, "Old books don't pay for new renovations, Mother." Then she called the auction house. For 30 years, I helped him build this collection. Every weekend at dusty estate sales, every anniversary gift a rare find. It wasn't about money. It was a legacy, our shared story, bound in leather and ink. I supported her through private school, paid for her wedding, funded the down payment on the very home she now says I can no longer afford to live in. A mother provides, but I never imagined my life's work would become an obstacle to her next home renovation. As the auctioneers tagged each volume, I watched my life being dismantled, piece by piece. She was not just selling books, she was erasing him, erasing us. It was in that moment, seeing his favorite copy of Moby Dick treated like cheap inventory, that something inside me decided that if I was going to be erased, I wouldn't be erased quietly. After Richard, my husband, passed, the library became my sanctuary. The scent of old paper and leather was a comfort, a tangible link to our shared history. My daughter Clara would visit, but her visits grew shorter, her attention divided. Her marriage to a man with prospects had changed her. Our quiet world of books seemed to embarrass her. She'd say, "Mother, this place is a mausoleum." Her eyes scanning the room for dust, for imperfections, for anything to criticize. The books, she argued, were just dead weight, an asset that wasn't performing. "This real estate is wasted," she'd tell her husband on the phone, her voice a low murmur she thought I couldn't hear. I ignored it. I became a master of ignoring things. The condescending tone, the forgotten birthdays, the way she introduced me as her widowed mother, as if it were a title of pity, not a badge of survival. I paid the utility bills for their sprawling suburban home when they were a little tight one month. I funded her interior design course because she needed a creative outlet. I financed my granddaughter's writing lessons, the essential summer in the Hamptons. The ledger in my mind grew with each transaction. Each act of giving met with the polite, empty smile of entitlement. My support was not a gift. It was an expectation. It was the background radiation of her life, and I was the unseen source. The call came on a Tuesday. "Mother, we need to have a family meeting." The formality was a warning sign. They arrived that evening, Clara and her husband, armed with spreadsheets and real estate brochures. They sat me down at my own dining room table, the one Richard had built by hand, and laid out their plan with the clinical detachment of corporate raiders. "We've had the house appraised," Clara announced, avoiding my eyes. "The value has skyrocketed, and this collection," she waved a dismissive hand toward the library, "is just tying up capital." Her husband nodded in agreement, a silent partner in this meticulously planned ambush. "The market is hot. It's the perfect time to liquidate." Liquidate. A word for assets, not for a life's work. They spoke of tax implications and investment returns. They spoke of my future, of finding me a more manageable one-bedroom condo, a sensible choice for a woman of my age. Each word was a carefully chosen instrument of erasure, designed to make their generational theft sound like a kindness. I listened, my silence growing jam against a flood of fury. They spoke of my well-being, but their eyes kept flicking to the priceless first editions lining the walls. "It's for the best, Mother,"
Clara concluded, placing a hand on my arm with feigned sympathy. Think of it as securing your legacy. My legacy? My legacy was in this room. It was the ink on the pages, the love in the margins. I pulled my arm away. And what if I say no? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Clara's smile vanished. Then we'll have to proceed with the legal conservatorship. We have a doctor who will attest to your cognitive decline. Your attachment to these old things is not healthy. That was the final straw. The threat, veiled in the language of concern. They had planned for every contingency, including my sanity. They saw a confused old woman, not the mind that helped build this very legacy they sought to plunder. The auctioneers arrived the next morning. They moved with a chilling efficiency, their white gloves a grotesque parody of respect as they handled volumes that held a lifetime of memories. I watched as they packed away the complete works of Dickens, the signed copy of Faulkner, the fragile poetry collection Richard had given me on our first anniversary. Clara supervised, pointing and directing, her voice sharp and businesslike. She had become a stranger to me, a creature of cold calculation. As they carried out the final crate, leaving the shelves gaping and empty like a desecrated tomb, she handed me a crisp white envelope. The eviction notice. You have 30 days. I think that's more than generous. She didn't look back as she walked away, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of a life hollowed out. I sank to my knees on the bare wood floor, the envelope clutched in my hand, surrounded by the ghosts of what had been. It wasn't just books she had taken. She had taken my past. She had stolen my story. And in the silent ruin of my library, I knew this could not be the end. That night, in a motel room that smelled of defeat and cheap disinfectant, I sat with the one book I had managed to salvage, the copy of Moby Dick, his favorite. The binding was worn, the pages softened by the touch of his hands over half a century. I remembered a conversation years ago, after he had just acquired it. He'd been strangely secretive, smiling. "This one, Rosie," he had said, "has a value far beyond its market price. It holds our true insurance." I thought it was just sentimentality. But then, tracing the gilded spine, my finger caught on something that wasn't there before. A tiny, almost invisible seam. My heart hammered against my ribs. With trembling fingers, I found the latch. A section of the book, expertly hollowed out, swung open. Inside, nestled in red velvet, was not a jewel or a key, but a single folded document, a codicil to his will, notarized and dated just a year before he passed. His familiar, elegant script filled the page. The terms were simple, but their implications were an earthquake. The entire library upon his death was to be held in a private trust, with me as the sole trustee. The collection could not be sold or broken up without my express written consent. Any attempt to do so would immediately trigger a clause redirecting the full appraised value of the collection plus a punitive penalty of $5 million to the International League of Antiquarian Booksellers Preservation Fund. The debt would be the personal liability of the person who initiated the unauthorized sale, Clara. The grief that had been my constant companion for days evaporated, replaced by a glacial calm. The victim died in that motel room. The architect was reborn. The first call was not to a family lawyer. It was to a number from Richard's old address book. Dr. Alistair Finch, the world's foremost expert on bibliographic law and a close friend of my husband's. I explained the situation, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. He listened in silence. When I finished, there was a pause. Richard was a brilliant man, Alistair said, his voice a low rumble, and it appears he was also a prescient one. The codicil is legally ironclad. What do you wish to do, Rose? I wish to allow the sale to proceed, and then I wish to enforce the penalty clause. To the letter. The next few days were not spent in sorrow, but in meticulous preparation. I was no stranger to research. Before I was a mother, before I was a wife, I was a legal librarian, a hunter of precedent in obscure clauses. I visited the city records office, obtaining certified copies of the trust documents Richard had filed. I contacted his financial advisor and secured statements for the private accounts linked to the trust. Accounts Clara had no idea existed. Each piece of paper was a brick in the foundation of the reckoning to come. My daughter believed I was a relic, a creature of the past. She had forgotten that the past holds the power to shape the present. My lawyer, on Alistair's recommendation, was a woman as sharp and unforgiving as a shard of glass. Together, we drafted the letters, prepared the injunctions, and charted the financial dominoes. The auction house was proceeding with the sale, their appraisers salivating over the collection, completely unaware of the legal time bomb on which they were sitting. They had taken Clara's word and her forged signature on a release form as sufficient. A fatal mistake. The trap was set. The beauty of it was its simplicity. I didn't need to act. I didn't need to confront or accuse. The mechanism of my daughter's downfall was her own arrogance, her own greed. All she had to do was finalize the sale. All she had to do was accept the money. The money she believed she was stealing from me would in fact be the very instrument of her ruin. All I had to do was wait for the hammer to fall. And the sound, I knew, would be magnificent.
The notification arrived on a Friday, a wire transfer from the auction house for just over 7 million euros. Clara must have felt invincible. She sent me a single text message that night, a photo of a real estate listing for a penthouse apartment overlooking the Seine. There was no caption. None was needed. Her message was clear. My world was sold. Her new world was bought. She didn't know she was celebrating her own ruin. On Monday, the first letter arrived. Not at my new, modest apartment, but at her sprawling home, the one my money had secured. It came on the elegant, watermarked letterhead of the International League of Antiquarian Booksellers Legal Counsel. The letter was short and direct. It informed her of the breach of the Trust's preservation codicil, the unauthorized sale of a protected collection. It demanded the immediate return of the collection, or failing that, payment in full of its last appraised value, 12 million euros, plus the contractually stipulated punitive penalty of 5 million, a total of 17 million euros due within 10 business days. Her panicked call came within the hour. "Mother, what is this? Some kind of mistake? A ridiculous legal threat?" I let her rant. Let the panic build. "It is not a mistake, Clara," I said when she finally paused for breath. "It is the codicil, your father's final protection for the one thing he loved more than any material possession. Did you not read the full trust document before you forged the release?" The silence on the other end of the line was my answer. The next dominoes fell with brutal speed. The auction house, notified by the League's lawyers, immediately froze the 7 million euros from the sale pending litigation. Then they filed their own lawsuit against her for fraud and reputational damages.
Her 7 million was a ghost, a number on a screen that had already vanished, swallowed by legal fees and potential judgments. The bank, alerted to the massive pending liability, called in her mortgage. The penthouse dream became a nightmare of foreclosure notices. Bankruptcy was her only option. A humbling fall for the woman who spoke of liquidating assets, but there was a detail in Richard's trust she had overlooked. The lawyers confirmed it. A penalty debt incurred through the willful destruction of a protected cultural collection is not dischargeable. It would be a shadow that followed her for the rest of her life. She came to me then, a month later, not the arrogant daughter who had lectured me on investment returns, but a broken woman. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple, frayed garments. Her face was pale, her eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. She stood on the doorstep of my small, rented apartment, a place smaller than her former walk-in closet. "Help me, mother," she wept. The words a raw whisper. "I'll lose everything. I'll go to prison." I let her in. I made her tea. I let her sob until her body was racked with exhaustion. "I don't have the money," she choked out. "The lawyers, the fines, it's impossible. Please tell them to stop." "I can't stop them," I said quietly. "But I can offer you a way out." Her head snapped up, a desperate flicker of hope in her eyes. "I will assume the debt, the full 17 million. It will be my burden." Tears of relief streamed down her face. "But Clara," I continued, my voice steady, "this is not a gift. It is a contract. You will work for me. You will work to repay the debt, one book at a time." That was a year ago. Now she works in a climate-controlled archive I funded, the Richard Beaumont Legacy Collection. She spends 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, cataloging, restoring, and sorting through thousands of volumes I have started to reacquire. Her salary is minimum wage. The balance of her debt is recorded in a ledger on my desk. At this rate, she will have it paid off in approximately 500 years. She is rebuilding the legacy she tried to erase. They say forgiveness is a virtue, but sometimes justice is a higher calling. Never let them tell you your life's work is worthless. Sometimes it's the most valuable weapon you have. Tell me in the comments, what is the one thing you've built that no one can ever take from you?